If you have a will, you are surely going to find a way. Today, we're going to talk about a boy who would have become a farmer if fate didn't have other plans for him. This is a story of a boy who contributed to America's development significantly. History marks him as the great inventor, one of the great industrialists, Mr. Henry Ford, founder of Ford Motor Company. From destined to becoming a farmer to founding Ford Motor Company, how did the 33-year-old turn his fate around? What inspired him? Henry wasn't just a businessman, he was an inventor, a great craftsman whose work in the automobile industry has profoundly given shape to what we are utilizing today. Hey guys, welcome back to our favorite channel, where you receive tons of information at literally no cost. Without further delay, let's take you through the life-changing story of a farm boy turned industrialist. Childhood. Henry was born to William Ford and Mary Littagott on the 30th of July, 1863, on a farm in a rural township which is situated in the west of Detroit. Though his parents were of distant English descent, they lived in Ireland. He wasn't a single child, of course. He had siblings, 2 sisters and 2 brothers. Ford received his primary education till the 8th standard from the Springwells Middle School. You'll be shocked to know that this revolutionary figure never attended high school. Do you have any idea how he understood he was inclined towards machines? Let us tell you. One day, he was working on a farm. It was then he saw a self-propelled road machine and a stationary steam engine that could be used to provide power to a saw or for a threshing. He was so very fascinated with the working of the machine, he asked its then operator, Fred Redden, to explain to him how it worked. After that, for the whole next year, Redden taught Henry how to operate and fire the machine. He later, in an interview, revealed, "It was this experience that showed me that I was an engineer by instinct." He also used to repair watches. Once his father gave him a pocket watch. Do you know what he did with it? He completely dismantled it and rearranged it. The villagers were amazed by this. At a very small age of 15, he could repair watches easily. A little later, he went through a very tragic incident. Henry lost his mother, which shook him from head to toe. Little Henry was completely devastated, as farm work was extremely despised by him. He didn't obey his father's wish of continuing their family work. Having lost his mother, now nothing was left that could keep him on the farm. He once said, "I never had any particular love for the farm. It was the mother on the farm I loved." Early life. He landed his first job in 1879 as an apprentice machinist in the nearby city of Detroit with James Flowers and Brothers. After working for some time, he shifted to Detroit Dry Dock Company. You all must be thinking after this, he never came back to his family farm, right? But you guys are a little mistaken, because he did return to his family farm, but not as a farmer. He came back and started operating the Westinghouse portable steam engine. Seeing this, the company decided to hire him to service their steam engines. Soon after this, he tied knots with Clara Jane Bryant in April 1888 and had a little son whom they named Edsel. It was at this time, for the sake of his family, he also took up farming and used to run a sawmill as well. Career. Edison Illuminating Company of Detroit took Ford in as an engineer in 1891. He devoted all his time and money to his interest in developing gasoline engines once he was appointed as chief engineer. These investigations concluded in 1896 with the fulfillment of a self-propelled automobile, which he called the Ford Quadricycle. He tested it on June 4th. After numerous test drives, Ford discussed ways to improve the quadricycle. Ford was also very lucky to meet the great Thomas Alva Edison. Edison agreed to Ford's automobile model. Motivated by Edison, Ford constructed and created an additional vehicle, finishing it in 1898. Supported by the money of Detroit lumber baron William H. Murphy, Ford quit the Edison Company and established the Detroit Automobile Company in August 5, 1899. However, the automobiles manufactured were of poorer quality and elevated price than Ford preferred. Finally, the company was not profitable and it was discontinued in January 1901. Back then, forming a company alone was not his cup of tea. So, along with C. Harold Wills, he constructed and successfully raced a 26-horsepower vehicle in October 1901. Making profits with this design, Murphy and other various stockholders came together and formed the Henry Ford Motor Company in November 1901. Ford was appointed as a chief engineer there. But his problems didn't end here. Murphy brought in Henry M. Leyland as a consultant who made Ford leave the company. Now, there was no point in calling the company by Ford's name after he quit, so they changed the name to Cadillac Automobile Company. This didn't stop him. He teamed up with former cyclist Tom Cooper and produced 80-plus horsepower vehicles called 999 Racers. Here, he got a little bit of help from one of his acquaintances, Alexander Y. Malcolmson. Malcolmson was a coal dealer in the Detroit area. Soon enough, they formed a partnership and named it Ford and Malcolmson Ltd. to construct vehicles. Ford now focused all its attention on forming an inexpensive automobile. This newly formed duo took a factory on lease and had an agreement with a shop owner. When it was the time for their first payment to the contractual dealer, a crisis arose because the sales were tremendously low. Ford Motor Company. In answer, Malcolmson pulled in another group of investors and persuaded the Dodge brothers to approve a fraction of the new company. Ford and Malcolmson was renamed to the Ford Motor Company on June 16, 1903, having $28,000 in capital. The actual investors were Ford and Malcolmson, the Dodge brothers, Malcolmson's uncle John S. Gray, Malcolmson's secretary James Cozens, John W. Anderson, and Horace Rackham. Due to Ford's volatility, Gray was appointed president of the business. Ford then illustrated a recently manufactured car on the ice of Lake St. Clair, riding 1 mile in 39.4 seconds and establishing a land speed record of 91.3 miles per hour. Ascertained by his accomplishment, race driver Barney Oldfield, who named his new Ford Model 999 in honor of the quickest locomotive of the day, took the car around the country, creating the Ford brand known throughout the United States. Ford was also one of the first supporters of the Indianapolis 500. Model T. In October 1908, Ford came up with the Model T. It's a known fact that the steering wheel stays on the right side, right? But Ford's model had it on the left side, and surprisingly, all the other manufacturers started copying that. The full engine and transmission were restricted, the 4 cylinders were thrown in a solid block, the suspension utilized 2 semi-elliptic springs. The car was extremely easy to ride and simple and inexpensive to repair. It was so reasonable at $825 in 1908, with the rate falling every year. By the late 1920s, the bulk of American drivers had understood to ride the Model T. Even though drivers who were only aware of the Model T's different foot-operated planetary transmission and steering column-operated throttle cum accelerator had to understand an entirely different pair of abilities to ride any additional gasoline-powered auto at the time. Foot Aeroplane. Honestly, tell me in the comments below, how many of you knew about this aviation company? I bet the majority of you didn't. Like other automobile firms, Ford joined the aviation industry during World War I, creating Liberty engines. After the war, it paid back to auto manufacturing until 1925, when Ford developed the Stout Metal Airplane Company. Ford's most profitable aeroplane was the Ford 4AT trim motor, often called the Tin Goose because of its corrugated metal structure. It utilized a new alloy called Alclad that stirred the corrosion opposition of aluminum with the stability of duralumin. Edsall's death. In 1943 came another dark time when Henry lost his beloved son to cancer at the age of only 49. He went through numerous cerebrovascular accidents, which left him dilapidated, and he slowly was losing his mental abilities. Ford was pushed to the side, and important decisions were made under his name without him even knowing those. Charles Sorensen received huge popularity due to his control measure, which made Henry jealous. Ford's incompetence directed to conversations in Washington about how to rebuild the business, whether by wartime government ruling or by initiating an uprising among managers and directors. Forced out. Henry was forcefully turned out of his own company. Can you imagine how he must have felt? Nothing occurred until 1945 when, with bankruptcy a severe risk, Ford's wife Clara and Edsall's widow Eleanor met face-to-face with him and requested he secede supervision of the business to his grandson, Henry Ford II. They intimidated them to sell off their stock, which amounted to 3/4 of the company's total shares if he rejected. Ford was reportedly furious, but had no option but to back down. The young man took over and, as his initial deed of business, fired Harry Bennett. Death. His health declining, Ford gave up the company presidency to his grandson Henry Ford II in September 1945 and resigned. He died on April 7, 1947, of cerebral hemorrhage at Farrell Lane, his property in Dearborn, at the age of 83. A social viewing was organized at Greenfield Village, where up to 5,000 people per hour documented past the casket. Burial services were done in Detroit's Cathedral Church of St. Paul, and he was laid to rest in Ford Cemetery in Detroit. With this, we've come to the end of today's video. It doesn't take a great background to be someone great in the future. All you gotta do is do what your heart says, and you will never be mistaken. Do hit the like and share, and subscribe.
Rich bio. It all starts from zero.